With us, John Heilman, and also around the table, Republican Congressman from Illinois. He's 18 years old.
Aaron Schock.
And from Washington, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for the Washington Post and MSNBC political analyst Eugene Robinson. Dylan Radigan, still, luckily for us, with us. Good to see you guys. Really quickly, Aaron, before we go to news, the Deficit Commission.
Yeah.
It came out, it had a lot of tough proposals. Do you think that all politicians should just back off and give this commission a chance before trying to kill it in the cradle?
A couple things that are frustrating. Number one, the other 18 commissioners haven't even weighed in on the proposal yet. We just heard from Paul Ryan, who's going to be the chairman of the Budget Committee, and Dave Camp, who's going to be the chairman of the Ways and Means. Two pretty powerful guys this next cycle. They're just now weighing in. And I think it's what's wrong with Washington, D.C. If there's any message that we heard in the last election, it's that you're not listening.
Right.
And so why don't we let the American people take a look at this 50-page document, and then we as representatives can do our job representing them and hear from them. A lot of folks, you know, they know we're in tough shape, but the 50-page document does a very good job of outlining why we're in bad shape, the true reality of our entitlements and why it's not sustainable at the current levels.
And Gene Robinson, I think it's very interesting. The president has sat back. As we've been saying, he could have killed it already by having people leak negative comments about it. But he's reserving judgment. Harry Reid's acting responsibly. Mitch McConnell, John Boehner, all acting responsibly. Nancy Pelosi was irresponsible yesterday, but she has backed off, saying, accusing them of, like, killing seniors. When actually, this wouldn't be implemented until my 2-year-old Jack retired 65 years from now. But it sounds like Washington at least is being mature and letting the President's Commission have a chance.
Yeah, as Congressman Schock said, at least let the rest of the commission weigh in on these ideas and let the commission come up with something before you then kill it. And you know, some of these ideas are going to, as you know, have tough sledding in Washington. But anything that meaningfully attacks the deficit is going to have a tough road in Washington. And so, you know, everybody keep calm and carry on, and let the commission do its work.
The message is spreading across the globe. Keep calm and carry on.
It's written all over the walls of our office now,
too. We have huge.
I like it. Let's get a shot of it.
We do. Okay, all right, so let's go to news.
Some news. Your earpiece fixed yet? No. All right,
Still
so you
can't
can hear
anything.
us, but you can't hear Gene?
That's right.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's a corrupt media. It's a corrupt media. You guys just set up.
Undermine you. Here you go. Don't worry, Aaron. We'll tell you what he said. President Obama is speaking out about the possible deal on Bush-era tax cuts.
Hold on. Gene, you can't say that about a congressman.
Really?
He's a sitting congressman, for God's sake.
Nice kid.
I cannot believe he said that. You know what? Even though he's a public figure, that is slander.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I got you covered.
To attack his wardrobe like that?
To attack his wardrobe and his
He looks
parents.
adorable. I just mean it.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
All right, so let's go on. President Obama says he continues to believe that keeping cuts for the wealthy would be a mistake.
My number one priority is making sure that we make the middle-class tax cuts permanent. I continue to believe that extending permanently the upper income tax cuts would be a mistake and that we can't afford it. And my hope is that somewhere in between there we can find some sort of solution.
All right, before I go on to the whole David Axelrod angle to this, which is getting a little convoluted, just bottom line it here for us.
The bottom line is a deal's going to be done. I mean, you're just reading the tea leaves. It looks like a deal's going to be done. And David Axelrod was sending a message to the left when he went to the Huffington Post. He said, listen, we got to deal with reality.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, a lot of bloggers on the left didn't deal with reality, just like bloggers on the right don't deal with reality. They've got to do a deal. They're going to do a deal, Dylan, at some point. The left's not going to like it. But the president, he didn't lose independence by 18 percentage points because the left wasn't with him. He's got to get those independents back if Democrats want to run Washington 2 years from now.
I think the thing that strikes me, just in listening to this conversation so far, is the compulsion to deal with reality, as we're all calling it, whatever reality, whether it's in this piece of paper or whatever it is. And I think that while true, is a dangerous path in the sense that your reality and my reality and his reality can change. And so unless we truly comprehend not just what
about my reality?
No, your sentence.
I guess what I'm really getting at is it's one thing to do with the reality of our liabilities. $70 trillion in unfunded liabilities for this country over decades. So that's a real problem, obviously. But to call that the only reality without acknowledging, like I said, the flaws in tax policy, the flaws in the incentives in the financial system.
That's what the tax cuts are about, though.
But what it's not, I understand, but what frustrates me a little bit about all of this is that it's easier for the media and politicians to sit around and have a fairly intellectualized, professorial conversation about how you're going to renovate a financial architecture that doesn't work. It's an entirely different thing to deal with the reality right now of a trade policy and investment policy and tax policy that is not serving the job creation and economy in this country today.
But
it's easier to go out to 2015.
So in terms, Sharon, in terms, Aaron, I was here.
That was Eugene. Eugene was calling him Sharon.
Really? So anyway, Aaron, really? Yeah. Eugene calling Sharon?
No.
Too? Okay. That's right. So you can hear me, right? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So you can hear me.
Question.
So we're talking about tax cuts here. This isn't a structural issue. This is getting people back to work. Would you agree that trying to make the Bush tax cuts permanent is going to be hard to pay for? But if you're just talking about extending tax cuts for a year or two when we have 15% unemployment, maybe that's the compromise you make. You just extend it out a year.
Does that make sense?
2 years until working class people in your district have jobs again.
Well, if you're asking me, as I think John Boehner was asked before the election, if this is the only vote that we're going to have on the House floor, obviously I would support it. But this is what no one's really talking about when they say the president's open to compromise or David Axelrod said this or that. The fact of the matter is the president's already been rolled. Prior to the election, prior to the adjournment of the Congress, 38 House Democrats came out and said, we're not going to vote with you, Speaker Pelosi, on a partial extension. President Obama, you haven't won us over in your case to the American people.
So great. You're going to pass this easily. Whatever you want to pass through the House, you can pass through the House. Just like Nancy could pass through cap and trade.
Well,
but you're going to have to get 51 votes in the
Republicans.
Senate. I understand. I understand that. But the fact is you're not going to get a deal unless you compromise with the president. At the end of the day, do you think you guys and the Senate and the president can come together and maybe extend it for a year or two as a compromise?
Well, I think we have to do something. And so at the end of the day, if the Senate is not willing to go along with the full extension, obviously a compromise means you don't get everything you want. At the end of the day, we've got to do something because businesses are holding back. When I toured my district during campaign season, every small business guy said, you're killing me. I don't know what my cost of capital is going to be. I don't know what my estate tax is going to be. Make a decision so that I can start investing.
It's amazing. And Gene, what Aaron says is what I've been hearing. What the congressman says is what we've all been hearing. I'm sure you've been hearing it as well. You've got CFOs, you've got small business owners, you've got CEOs saying, I'm just not exactly sure if I can invest back in the economy. Do you think we're going to see over the next 2 years with divided government a little more stability so the $3 trillion that's sitting on the sidelines will get reinvested in the economy?
Well, that would be nice because that would get the economy going again. I'm not, I frankly think that they're going to start spending that money and investing that money when they see a demand for their goods and services, when business people see demand for their goods and services. And then I think they will forget about all this. Oh, we're so uncertain. We don't know what to do here. We don't know what to do there. In fact, if they saw demand, they would know exactly what to do. They'd make more and do more and hire more people.
Okay, great point. So in terms of the compromise, do you think it's going to be a year or two? They'll extend the Bush tax cuts a year or two?
I think they probably will. But I just want to point out one other thing that I've been hearing from the American people. I've been kind of going around on book tour and doing some speaking and this and that. And there are a lot of progressives out there who are the American people too, who are who feel strongly about this issue as a matter of fairness, as a commitment to progressive taxation, and as a not some sort of absolute line in the sand, but something by which they are really looking at the administration and Democrats in Washington and how they stand up for what they say are their principles. And I'm hearing that from regular folks. So while a deal I think is going to get done in Washington, because a deal has to get done, it's going to have, whatever the deal is, it's going to have consequences, and one of those consequences, if it is an extension of the tax cuts for the wealthy, is going to be more disillusionment among important parts of the Democratic base.
Gene, but you would agree that the president's party lost the election not because they lost progressives, but because independents bolted 18% to the Republican Party. There was a 36% swing among independents from 2006 to 2010. That wasn't because they thought the president was too moderate.
Well, basically, you're right. Surely that's the big reason why they lost. But there were other reasons why they lost too. One other reason they lost was, and one contributing factor was an inability to mobilize parts of the base, including all those first-time voters, as young voters, minorities in numbers sufficient to make a difference in some important races.
Dylan.
And I tell you, this is not just kind of, Washington pundit talk. It's just, it's what I wrote about this morning, because it's what I really have been hearing from a lot of liberals out in the country. I realize that's not a huge majority of the country, but it's a significant bunch of people who need to be excited for Democrats to win.
They're still 20% of America, and so they need to be listened to as well. They do. They do. Seriously, I love progressives.
I know you do.
Except the ones that blog. Go ahead.
A question for you. Yep. All these policy conversations are either about saving money or trying to release money in some way, whether it's the tax cuts or austerity, the deficit commission, whatever it is. And there's lots of ways to do that. At the same time, once the money has been created, whether it's released through tax cuts or whatever it is, or the Federal Reserve, I don't care where the money comes from. The system for those who have the money, whether it's wealthy or receiving a tax cut, whatever it is, I've got an incentive as to what I do with that money. And I can either invest it in America, I can hire some people, we can start a business, or I can take that money out of the country in some fashion, invested in Brazil, invested in China, all these types of places. And at what point do we have to deal with not just how we create money, tax cuts or whatever, austerity, but the incentives for what happens to money once me, you, a corporation, I don't care who it is, has possession of it? Because right now the incentives appear to tell me if I have my money, well, you're going to make more of it taking it out. This is a real issue.
Pilot Ronick and you are cleared for landing.
Yes, you may land the plane.
So your question is?
Yes.
How do you create incentives to push the money into this country as opposed to taking it out?
Well, you raise an interesting point. One is, why is money leaving?
I mean, there's all sorts of trade policies.
In all fairness to Dylan, he raised several interesting points.
He did. So do I get like 10 minutes to respond? So look,
several points. Not all of them were interesting, but they were.
Dave Camp and Paul Ryan, who are going to be leaders in tax issues, have said we need to find ways to incentivize people to invest their money here, and a simplification of the tax code is in order. But second, I think it's important to note that harmful policies, I would argue, like cap and trade, incentivize a manufacturer to say, you know what, if you're going to raise my cost
I don't disagree with that, but let's back it up a little bit and look at the policies that are, forget that's a policy that could exist, and yes, it would take money to Brazil and all the rest of it, but let's look at the policy that does exist. I run Caterpillar right now. I want to make tractors in the United States. China's charging me a 30% tariff to take it out of this country, so my incentive now is to take my money and my jobs to China to make the tractors there. Is Jim Owens a bad guy at Caterpillar for doing that? Probably not, but does the policy, because China has a very different trade policy than America, incentivize him to do that? And does that cost us jobs? And does that cost us productivity? Yes, it does. And
well, the fact of the matter is this. Here's the fact.
Say yes or no.
Aside from Japan, every major country is a tax haven to the United States because we have the highest corporate tax rate outside of Japan. So should we look at our competitiveness in the world? Absolutely. Should we look at ways to keep a company like Caterpillar invest here? But the fact of the matter is, we have to be open about our competitiveness, our trade policies, the free trade agreements. No one
disagrees that, but if you talk to Dan D'Amico, CEO of Nucor Steel, largest steel company in North America, and ask him how the free trade agreements have affected his business, and what he'll tell you is, if there's a steel contract for a bridge in Brazil, if there's a steel contract for a major building and government development in China, he is not allowed to bid on that, but he is forced to compete with everybody.
We're going to bottom line it. Aaron, the bottom line is there are a lot of Americans that hear Washington worship at the altar of free trade, and they go, wait a second, explain to me why we should let other countries beat the hell out of us with these tariffs.
We're not allowed to compete in their country.
We shouldn't, but let's look at what's on the table. Colombia, Panama, and South Korea. Colombia right now, we buy the majority of our flowers from there. We buy a lot of coffee from there, tariff-free, under the Emerging Markets Act. So, you know, when you look at a company like Caterpillar, for example, in my hometown, they say, wait a minute, if I want to sell my tractor there, I have to pay a tariff.
Exactly.
But if we buy, so the argument that the argument of passing a trade agreement, the misnomer out there is that somehow it puts our companies at a competitive disadvantage, when in reality, by us doing nothing, we are already at a competitive disadvantage.
Agree.
While other countries like Canada, for example, have just signed a trade agreement with Colombia.
Let me bring in Gene here.